welcome to another off-the-shelf board game review. Today we're going to be looking at Dreadball. It's a game designed by Jake Thornton and published by Mantic Games. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Mantic Games, they are actually based in Nottingham in the United Kingdom. Dreadball is a miniatures game for 2 players. Oddly enough, Dreadball lists as a game for players ages 7 and up, but since it is a game from the United Kingdom, I'm assuming they use different age classifications than they do here in the United States. The playtime is about 30 to 60 minutes. For those of you who are not familiar with Mantic Games has actually made a couple different miniatures-based games, and Dreadball is based in their sci-fi futuristic setting where they actually have a different game based in. Dreadball is actually a futuristic version of, the best way to describe it would be the game of basketball if you allowed fouls, somebody threw in a little bit of hockey rules, meaning, you're allowed to fight, and added in, instead of 1 hoop target, 3 hoop targets. But basically, the best way to describe it, if you want to sum it up in a few words, is Dreadball is a futuristic version of basketball with a little bit of extra spin added to it. In the game of Dreadball, when you get it, you're going to get a rule book, a game board, you're going to get 21 miniatures, a whole bunch of cards, some cardboard tokens. I haven't punched mine, and the simple reason why I haven't done that is I, again, got the Kickstarter version of the game, and actually came with, I'm going to straight out say, it came with much better components than the Kickstarter version of the game for the cardboard tokens. So I didn't even use these, but I left them so you can see what comes in the box. Game also comes with our roster pad and 18 dice are red, white, and blue. The different colors of the dice do have different purposes in the game. I'll get to that when I describe the game. The basic box for Dreadball comes with 2 teams, the orc team and the human team. Both teams play quite differently. And I'm going to go ahead and say now, for anybody who's ever played Blood Bowl, there are a couple similarities between the 2 games, but the differences outweigh the similarities. And if you stay tuned towards the end of the review, I'm going to take a few moments to talk about the white elephant in the room. And I'm actually going to go through and do the full review, and at the end I'll be talking a little bit about Blood Bowl versus Dreadball. Dreadball being a miniatures game, the biggest attraction to the game are going to be the miniatures. And the box does come with 21 miniatures. Now, this is a true miniatures game, which means the miniatures all come requiring assembly. This isn't the kind of game like a traditional Fantasy Flight game, for example, maybe Descent, where you just pop open the box, all the miniatures are ready to go, and you basically, if you know how to play the rules, you can go to the shop, buy the game, bring it home, and start playing instantly. This game comes with these components. The miniatures are in a lot of pieces. You're going to be gluing hands, you're going to be gluing arms, you're going to be gluing legs. Your average miniature is anywhere from 5 to 10 pieces. A good way, or a good descriptor, if you want a good comparison, would be to describe it between Super Dungeon Explorer, a game by Cool Mini or not. If you ever put that game together, you'd understand how these minis are a little bit of a project. It's going to take you anywhere from probably about 2 to 3 hours just to assemble all the minis. The minis themselves actually are pretty well detailed. This is one of the orcs that comes with the team. If you have a look at it, you see that there's great detail on it, front and back. And all these miniatures do come unpainted, so it is going to be a little bit of a project to paint all these miniatures up. And I haven't painted my human or my orc teams because I want to let you see what the game looks like for the review. My extra teams have been painted. And the nice thing about the game is the miniatures actually do paint up pretty decently. Even for a quick little rush job taking about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. If I'm playing a game, I probably don't want to spend too much time painting the miniatures, because they're going to get a lot of use anyways. You're going to get banged up, so I just do a quick little paint job. But even with a quick little paint job, they actually end up looking pretty darn nice. Now, some people, when they look at a miniatures game, their first concern is the size of the miniatures. I can say that the miniatures that come with the game are actually pretty decently sized. I'm going to do a couple different comparisons with a couple other games that are available in the market. First of all, Dreadball versus Legends of the Dritz. See that the miniatures are pretty much the same size. And I'm actually using one of the orcs, which are one of the larger figures, so I'm actually going to throw in one of the human teams, which you'll see are a little bit smaller, but still, comparison to other miniature games, are actually still pretty decently sized. And if you want to look, you can see that they actually have a lot of detail, especially when you compare them to the Legend of Dritz board game. Here's a comparison to Fantasy Flight product. This is actually one of the miniatures from the Descent board game. Again, you see the size is pretty good. You'll notice that the Dreadball miniatures do have quite a bit more detail in them. Now to compare it to another hobby game, I'm going to show you a comparison between the Dreadball miniatures and Super Dungeon Explorer. You'll see that there's quite a bit of detail in comparison. That actually gives you a good idea of what a miniatures game looks like. You can see that the miniatures have a lot more detail, a little bit more of a challenge to paint, but if you do get them painted, they end up actually looking really, really nice. These miniatures, when they show up, are going to take a little bit of work though. Any hobbyist who's used to dealing with plastic is probably going to understand this, but some of the miniatures have flash on the mold line. And what flash is when they pour the plastic in the mold line, where the two sides of the mold meet, you're going to get a little bit of an overflow from the plastic. And basically it's going to, I don't know if it's going to be able to pick up on a camera, but I'm going to give this a try. You see just right between his head, the little plastic line that goes down his body on both sides? You're going to take a hobby knife to fix these guys up. My miniatures actually weren't that bad. I only had probably about 5 or 6 that had a lot of flash on them. Most of them were pretty decent. And one final one I'm going to show you is the referee. The referee would probably be the only miniature I'm actually semi-disappointed in. The miniature is actually really, really tiny and scrawny in comparison to a lot of them. In comparison to a Heroescape miniature, you can see that it's pretty small. But it's the only one that I had a problem with that I disagree with was the ref. Otherwise, all the miniatures are actually really nice, great detail. But I must emphasize, it's a little bit of a project putting these together. If you've done a miniatures game, it's not going to be a surprise for you, but if you've never had any experience with a miniature game, get ready for a little bit of work. Next best component of the game is going to be the rulebook. This is a fantastically designed rulebook. There's actually only 3 errata with the rulebook, and they're actually found on the website quirkworthy.com or at Mantic Games direct website. You're going to see that this is actually a very well designed rulebook. Full color images all throughout, explains the rules really, really well. It's a 80+ page rulebook with lots of full color pictures for painters who want to get ideas on how to paint their miniatures. It tells you a little bit of the fluff for the game, but it's going to give you a good description of the rules. You're not going to have too many questions after reading the rules going through. It also goes through and tells you how to form a league, which allows you to play a lot of games over time with the results from each game carrying over. If you wanted to think about it, like think of your NBA season. I'm going to use that term since I describe this game best as basketball. Some people kind of describe Dreadball as hockey, but I see it more as basketball. Next thing is the board. Not much to the board. It's a pretty simple fold-out board. It's a little bit on the small side, especially when you get a whole bunch of miniatures on the board. You can actually start feeling a little bit crowded, especially when miniatures start getting knocked down. Would have liked to have seen a slightly bigger board, but not too terrible in the long run. I'll explain the different colors on the boards when we get to that. Next thing we got are the cards. Cards are pretty simple. They basically they're pretty simple cards. There's not much to them at all. There's just 2 colors on them or 3 colors, just a whole bunch of text. You're not going to find any fancy images on them or anything like that. A little bit of stuff on the back. Quality of the cards isn't too terrible. They're pretty thick. They're going to last a little while. They're probably not the thickest, but not the thinnest cards I've ever seen either. They're pretty decent. Game comes with 18 dice. They're pretty standard dice. They are on the smaller side, and again, there's 3 different colors of dice. I'll explain why that is when I get into the rules explanation. Next, you have counters used for the game. I'm just going to show you what you get as a Kickstarter. With the Kickstarter version, you actually get some really nice plastic versions. I don't know if these are going to be available on Mantic's website. If they are, I say get them, because these are about as thick as a business card. They're not really impressive at all. Finally, you're going to get a roster pad, and this is only for league play. And I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain league play a little later on. Overall, the components for the game are actually really good as the miniatures go. You get some pretty good quality miniatures. The game comes with 21 of them, plus the little plastic balls. Again, a little bit of work putting them together, but they're actually really well designed. A fantastic rule book that comes with the game. Again, there are only 3 errata for the entire rule book, which I think is actually fantastic for a first run of a game. And of the 3 errata, 1 is actually only a true error. The other one is just a word omission. And if you've read the rest of the rules, you can pretty much almost figure out what they're actually trying to tell you. Other than that, the board, probably not the best quality I've ever seen in a game board. It's actually a little bit on the flimsy side. I'd probably equate it to something I get from Parker Brothers. Not too bad. Overall, the components, not too bad for what you're paying. Before I go on, I should take a moment to mention that Dreadball retails for $79.99. I've actually seen it locally at Amazon.com, so you don't have to pay, or you don't have to worry about paying shipping charges all the way from the UK. And I actually saw it on Amazon for just shy of $60, and that was a local Amazon.com here locally in the United States. Also, additional teams, and I haven't seen these on any of the local websites yet, but I'm sure they will show up. Additional teams cost $24.99. Each one is going to come with 8 additional figures for that team. You only need 8 figures to play basic Dreadball, but if you're going to do league play, you're going to have probably at least 12 figures for each team. And I don't know how much the shipping is going to cost from the United Kingdom. You can either wait for those teams to start showing up in the United States, or contact Mantic Games, or go to Mantic Games website and find out just how much the shipping would be. It's manticgames.com. Before I explain to you how Dreadball is played, I'm going to take a few moments to explain how each component is actually used in the game. I know I said at the beginning of the review I'm going to try not to use any of the Kickstarter exclusive components, but I can't rant on this enough. These little cardboard tokens are terrible. I can't stand them. They're cheap. They're literally as thick as a business card. I want to just throw them away, and when I'm done with this review, I actually am going to throw them away. The game comes with these little plastic components in place of those little cardboard components. I'm going to use these only for the explanation. Again, the basic game comes with those little business card, cheap plastic or cheap cardboard pieces of those little cardboard tokens. First thing I'm going to show you is what are called the action tokens. Each player on their turn is going to get 5 action tokens. Now there's 2 teams. There's the home team and the visitor team, and I think you can see this on the camera, but it says home team and the other one says visitors team. These are basically your action counters, and what they're going to do is they're going to be used to let you know when you've used an action. So on your turn, when you're going to perform an action, you're going to take one of your 5 counters, place off to the side just so you know it's not one of your usable actions anymore, and perform an action. That lets you know that you have 5 actions, and just lets you keep track of all your actions on the turn. I'm going to take a moment to explain the board. This part of the board is a score track. You're going to notice that it goes from 0 to 7 on both sides. Dreadball is a little bit different in the way it works on scoring. The way a lot of games go is each team scores a point, scores a point, scores a point. At the end of the game, you'd have a score anywhere from 75 to 80 or something like that. Dreadball doesn't quite work like that. The way it works is every time you score a point, you're going to work towards your way on the scoreboard. So if the home team, which is the white side, and the visitors are the red side, the home team were to score 3 points by making a score over right here, they would move up 3 points. Now if the visitors comes back and makes an amazing 4-point score, this is actually going to slide 4 points this way, and now you're going to see that the visitor team is actually ahead by 1 point. Now if the home team comes back and scores 1 point, it's going to slide 1 point, and its now its score is going to be back at 0 again, and if the game ends at 0, it's going to go into overtime. Top of the board is actually going to be your turn track, and you notice that's color coded, so white, red, white, red. Home team, visitor, home team, visitor. This is your turn track. When your turn begins, you're going to simply take the turn tracker and move it up. The game goes for 14 turns. At the end of the 14th turn, whoever has the highest score is going to be declared the winner. And it may be funny, and this will be really understandable to people who played Blood Bowl, and I'm going to try my hardest not to make too many references until I do my little comparison at the end, but it is actually possible to win the game without any miniatures left on the board. Sounds silly, but yes, it is very possible. I've already shown you the miniatures, but one little point to make on the miniatures, every miniature has a facing. And I'm going to place on the board and try to explain this to you. Hopefully the camera won't make this a little bit too obscene to stare at, but I'm going to do a little focusing in. I try not to do too much focusing in and out because it can be a little bit distracting, but I'm going to move the camera in just a little bit here. During the game, you're going to have two things. You're going to have threat hexes and you're going to have facing. Threat hexes are going to be the 3 hexes in front of your miniature, and your facing is everything from the left and to the right forward. That's your front facing. Everything behind that is your back facing. It's easy to see just to make a solid line going like this. If a hex comes into question, if it's a front hex or a rear hex, because it's split in half, such as this half, if it's partially in your front hex, it is considered 100% in your front hex or your front field of view. Your threat hexes are your 3 hexes in front of your miniature, and that's going to be used for slams and also for distracting your opponents. I'll explain more of that when I get a little more into the game. Just know that your 3 front hexes are your threat hexes, and everything on the front half of your miniature is your front field of view. Next thing I'm going to do is explain the cards to you. The cards are pretty simplistic. Basically what's going to happen is when they come into play, they're going to be used by the players, and they're like this one's usable by a guard, and it says a guard can take 1 free any action. A couple things to explain on it though. This number right here, it's going to be a number 3 on this card, is how many spaces the ref is going to move when this card is drawn at the end of the turn. This track right here is used to determine when a random or sometimes card play based card is going to affect one of the members of the team. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to decide between the 2 players what miniatures are eligible to receive whatever action is causing this random decider, and then you go down the list from top to bottom and you're going to find out if that miniature is present. As soon as you get to that miniature's number, and all these miniatures are numbered like a basketball or football team, that's the guy who's going to take effect to it. So you'll see this card starts with 10, this one starts with 2, and let's say that you have an incident between numbers 2, 4, and 8. You pick a random card and you look for 2, 4, 8. Whoever is the first one you run into, in this case 4. 4 is the one who's going to suffer the consequences or get the random event. Next thing you're going to notice, all the way down on the bottom is a group of dots. This is used for your fan support and fan checks. I'll explain that a little bit further when I explain a little more into the rules. Also note there are 3 different kinds of cards. There's the green special move cards. There are the blue event cards. And there's the slightly more rare, I think there's only 5 or 6 of them in the entire game. And they're called showboating cards. They're special cards and they are orange. There's also going to be 2 more cards that are not part of the deck. There is the home fan deck card and the visiting fan card. I'll explain that when we get further into the game. Finally, as I said earlier, you're going to notice there are 3 different colors to the dice. The white dice are for the home team to use. The red dice are for the visitors to use. Blue dice are coaching dice. Now, coaching dice are one-time use dice. Once you use a coaching dice, it is permanently removed from the game. You can earn additional coaching dice by getting fan support. But again, once a coaching dice is used, it is gone, and you have to actually announce you use the coaching dice before you make your roll. So if you have a very tough roll that you only have 2 dice to roll from, you have to decide if you want to use that coaching dice and add it to your roll beforehand. Once you've already made your roll, you cannot decide to add your coaching dice back in. So you couldn't do like this, say, oh, I failed that roll, I'm going to use my coaching dice now. No, you had to actually announce you're using that coaching dice before you even announced the roll. Dreadball is a fictional version of a made-up sport, but it takes a lot from a couple different real-life sports and adds a little bit of its own twist to it. Basically, if you want to know a best description of it, is it's basically basketball with 3 hoops that are not always on the board. They're like a lot of sports. Each player is going to take one of 3 positions. Now, the game right now is considered in Season 1. There are 4 races available for the game. There are the humans, There are the Orcs, which is spelled ORX. There's the Ratmen, and then there's the Forge Fathers. Forge Fathers are basically dwarves. Ratman isn't their real name, but I always call them the Ratmen. Sorry, it's just too many years of playing Games Workshop games, and I don't want to call them Skaven, because if I don't call them Ratmen, I may end up calling Skaven, then you're all going to be able to make a lot of fun of me for calling them Skaven. Anyways, there's 3 positions in the game. There's actually a 4th position, but I'm not going to get into that yet because I don't want to talk about the league rules, because the league rules make it almost a little bit more of a game, because there's a huge meta game that goes with the league rules. In the basic game, there are 3 positions. There's the guard, and basically the guard is their big burly guy. Their big objective is to knock the opponent down. On the other end of the spectrum, there is a striker. The striker's one job is to get the ball to their opponent's side of the board and score one of the 3, I call them hoops. Then there's the middling person called the jack. The jack isn't as big of a bruiser as the guard. They're not as good as a scorer as a striker, but unlike the striker and the guard, they can actually fill both roles. While a guard can never touch the ball for any reason, if they actually end up in a space with the ball actually scatters away. So they can never pick up the ball, which means they can never score. Whereas the striker, they can never slam, which is to knock opponent down. They can steal the ball, but they can never slam. And then your jack is your, like I said, your in-between player. He can slam a little bit, he can make scores a little bit, but he's not as good at either position. And again, further on the league rules, there's also a role called the keeper, which is basically a guard on steroids who can pick up the ball but cannot score with it. All he can do is basically punt it to the other side of the board. I started with the game already set up just to save a little bit of time. It is a miniatures game, which means they take a little bit more time to set up. Basically, what you're going to do for setup is each player is going to choose their team. I have it set up for a humans versus orc team. The humans will be the home team. The orcs are going to be the visitors. The players in turn are going to place 6 of their 8 figures on the board. You can have them anywhere you want, just as long as they do not cross this little yellow line, which is the launching line where the ball is going to launch at the end of every rush. Explain that in a moment. Then the visitor team is going to do the exact same thing. Each team has their own little bit of different abilities. For example, the orcs don't have any strikers. They have to play with guards and jacks only. Whereas the human team, they're pretty well balanced. They have guards, strikers, and jacks. Their guards hit pretty well, but not as hard as an orc guard. So the orc team plays more aggressively, while the human team plays more as a striker team. The second team, or correction, the third team that came out with the Kickstarter is going to be the Ratmen. They are really, really excellent at scoring, but they only come with guards and strikers. They don't have any jacks. And then finally, the Forge Fathers have guards, jacks, and strikers, but they don't have really good movement, but they have some of the best guards in the game because they come with an ability called Steady, which makes them very, very hard to knock down. Anyways, to complete the setup phase, what you're going to do is once you got all your miniatures out, you notice you'll have 8 to your team. 6 start on the board. You can never have more than 6 on the board unless you're willing to cheat and foul. And it's actually in the rules, but if you get caught doing it, you get in trouble. There's a ref on the board. If the ref catches you cheating, you're going to suffer the consequences. And there's also what's described as an eye in the sky. If for some reason a ref doesn't witness a foul, there's a chance that the eye in the sky can actually witness a foul. And again, I'll get into that in a little moment. I don't want to get too sidetracked. Every player is going to have a couple different stats. They're going to have a move stat, which is how far they can move. They're going to have a strength stat, which is basically how good they are at knocking an opponent down or surviving being knocked down. There's going to be a speed stat, which is basically used for certain skill checks that involve speed. There's a skill stat, which is going to be used for skill stats. And skill, don't get confused, skill is actually a statistic in the game. It's basically used for making baskets and other abilities. There's an armor check, which if you fail an armor check, you can actually be injured. If you fail an armor check by 1, you end up out of the game for 1 round. If you enter by 2 wounds, you're out of the game for 2 rounds. If you get 3 wounds, you're out of the game for 3 rounds. And if you suffer 4 more wounds, your player is actually removed from the game permanently. In a league game, he's actually killed. And again, I don't want to get too much on the league rules right now. After you've got your basic setup done, you're going to look at your individual team, and all the teams so far are slightly different in this. But you're going to get your starting coaching dice. Every team is going to start with at least one coaching dice, at least so far. Again, there's a couple more teams that are going to come out still, so this can change. The human team starts out with 2 cards, and the orc team starts out with 1 card. On a player's turn, what they're going to do is they're going to start off by moving the rush marker 1 space, and then they're going to be able to take 5 actions. And basically what they're going to do is they're going to use one of their action tokens, place off to the side, announce what the action is they're going to take, do any dice rolling that may be involved in that action, and they're going to spend another action token, do another one of their actions with their tokens, and they go through all 5 other action tokens. Once they've taken all their actions, they're going to do their your after turn upkeep. Then the ref is going to get a chance to move, and then it's going to be the other player's turn who's going to start off by advancing the turn marker. They're going to use their action tokens to take 5 actions. They're going to do their upkeep. They're going to make their ref movement, and this will go back to the first player. It's going to basically keep alternating all the way like this until you reach the 14th round. On a player's turn, they take a couple different actions. The first main action they do is a run action, which is basically they're going to move their total movement speed. Humans, for example, can move 5, and it's basically just counting the hexes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 action move. Next action you do is a sprint, which is basically you're doubling your move. And unlike a run, which you can turn any of your faces for free, in a sprint action actually costs you 1 movement to turn a hex face. So it doubles your move, so he can turn 1 hex face, move forward, turn 1 hex face, move forward, and that would be 3 moves, and you move up to a total of 10. Your next action you need to do is a slam, which is an attempt to knock an opponent down. That's a striker, and a striker can't do that. This is a guard. If he moved 5, 1, 2, 3, he can attempt to slam this orc guard down. Another action you can do is you can steal, only available for strikers and jacks. Is if they get up next to a player who has a ball, they attempt to steal the ball. If you have the ball, you attempt to throw the ball. You try to throw it to score a point, or you can throw it to a teammate to catch it, or you can actually throw it at an opponent and attempt to injure an opponent. You can dash, which actually allows you to take an extra move after you completed your move, and there's a chance you can fall when you do it. You can evade, and evading is basically a free action. It doesn't cost you an action token, but what it means is if you're in a threat zone of an opponent, the striker was in this jacks and he wanted to move away from this jacks, he actually has to move through his threat zone, and to move out of that threat space, he actually has to make a successful action. If he fails, he's going to fall down. And all 3 of these spaces, as I showed before, are threat spaces. So if you move from here to here, it'd be an evade check. From here to here would be another evade check, but after that he's out of his threat zone and he can continue his movement. All actions in Dreadball use a dice-based mechanic to see whether you succeed or fail. Every action you're going to take in the game is going to use 3d6, which is 3 6-sided dice, and what you're going to do is you're going to compare your roll to a statistic. And if you roll equal to or higher than a statistic, you're going to get a success. And there's a little bit of variety in that. Give me a second, I'll get to that. For example, if you want to do a slam is a strength-based test. If you didn't have any modifiers, you'd simply roll 3d6. If you needed a 4 or higher, you count every success as a 4 or higher, so that'd be 1 success, 2 successes, so you'd have a 2 success on your action. One little point, now that I rolled a 6, I like to show you this, is anytime you roll a 6, you're going to roll that 6 again and count that if it's an additional success. Every time you roll a 6 is always a success, and each additional 6 is going to allow you to roll the die again and get an additional success. So if you get 4 6s in a row, you have 4 successes, and if the next die you roll is a 5, you only need a 4 or higher, you'd actually have 5 successes at that point. Now, to keep things simple, Dreadball is actually pretty cleanly designed in this aspect, and I really like it. Nothing in the game will ever modify what you need to roll for success. So if it's a strength-based test and your strength is 4, you always need a 4 or higher to succeed. Always. Nothing will ever say -1 strength, +2 strength, -3 strength, whatever. The game modifies how many dice you're going to roll. For example, if you're a guard and you're doing a slam, you automatically get a +1 to your slam check. So instead of rolling 3 dice, you roll 4 dice. And you're going to count how many successes you get. If you get any 6s, you're going to re-roll those and count those as additional successes if they succeed. Now there's 3 different kind of dice tests that you can do in the game. The first one is a very basic test like I just showed you, where you're going to roll the dice. If you get at least 1 success or more, you basically completed the action successfully. If you fail to get at least 1 success, you failed. The next thing you're going to see is a contested action, which is basically each player is going to roll a certain amount of dice depending on their statistic. Now remember, bonuses add or subtract the amount of dice rolled, never changing the statistic. So let's say 2 characters, both of them are guards, so they're going to each roll an extra +1, are going to be slamming each other. You would simply roll the dice for both of them. And let's say this is a human versus an orc. Find my human guard, move him next to the orc guard. Now an orc has a strength of 3, and a human guard has a strength of 4. So every one of these dice that is a 3 or higher for the orc is going to be 1 success, and every one of these dice that is a 4 or higher for the human is going to be a success. You can see I got some 6s here, so instead of re-rolling these just to make this simple, I'm actually just going to add another die so you can see how this works. And for the visitor team, the orc, I'm going to roll another die. So we're going to see that the human has only 1 die that's a 4 or higher, so they only have 1 success. Whereas the orc needed a 3 or higher, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 successes. So we have 4 successes versus 1. So the orc has actually won the contest. And additionally, they've actually doubled their opponent, which gives you an additional benefit. Anytime it's a contested action that is doubled, if you manage to double, which means you get twice as many successes as your opponent, you've effectively doubled the action. So if your opponent gets 0 successes and you get 1, you've doubled. If your opponent gets 4 successes, you need to get 8 in order to double it. The final action is going to be, pretty much the best way to describe it is a scaling difficulty. Whereas the first time you make the roll, you're going to need 1 success. The second time you make the roll, you're going to need 2 successes. Third time you make the roll, you're going to need 3 successes. And this is used for stuff such as dashing, where if you dash, the first time you dash, you need to get 1 success on the test. The second time you dash on the same move, you're going to need to get 2 successes. Third time, 3 successes. And again, that's going to keep going as long as you want to keep pressing your luck until you reach the point where it's almost going to be impossible to succeed. Now, interesting thing about Dreadball is the game is constantly in motion, and I know it's hard to say that about a board game where everybody's taking their turns, but the game has a lot of rules to make it feel like it's constantly in motion. The most important thing to remember is that every time a score is made, the ball goes right back immediately into play. This isn't the kind of game where as soon as somebody scores, the whole board is going to reset, and you're going to set everything back up again. Where the pieces are when you score is where that game is going to continue on from. In the start of a game, the ball is going to come into play, and the player whose turn is going to roll the die. The ball is going to land somewhere on this middle row based on your roll. If you roll 1 through 5, it's going to land on one of these little hexes that say DB on it. If you get a 6, the ball manages to make it all the way across and bounces off the wall. It's either going to go 1, 2, 3 here, or 4, 5, 6 here. So as I got a 6, I'm going to roll again. Going to get a 1, and the ball is going to end up right here. This player's turn is going to now start. They're going to advance to the 1, and they're going to be able to take actions based on their action allowance to get 5 actions. There are free actions, and one important thing I forgot to mention earlier is that each miniature can only take a total of 2 actions, plus an action from a card and an unlimited amount of free actions. What that means is I can spend 1 action on this miniature to move him or to do something with him, and spend another action on him to do another move if it was a legal move. That's not a legal move what I did, just using this for example. After that's done, I cannot spend any more actions on that miniature. Only thing I do is play a card on him, and this says any player can run. So if I played that on him, and if the ref wasn't in the way and he made his evade check, he could run and continue on. Plus, if I got any more free actions with him, he can take a free action, but after that, I cannot make any moves with that miniature anymore. And in this example, I still have 3 actions left to play with my turn. If at any time your player has the ball and loses the ball, or if they're able to pick up the ball and fail to pick up the ball, no matter how many actions they have left, their turn is over. So if you spend 1 action to move and try to pick up the ball, you roll your dice and you fail miserably at your dice pickup, your turn's over. Even though you still had 4 actions left, your turn's over. The ball is going to scatter based on the rules, and that would end up going this way, and it would actually land on him, and he would actually get a chance to catch it, and it's now actually this player's turn too. Also, once you do score, no matter where the miniatures are at, where they fall or anything like that, as soon as a player manages to score, and to score you need to make the ball land in one of these hexes, as soon as you score, the ball is immediately going to, that player's turn is going to immediately end. The ball is going to get relaunched down the center again. None of the miniatures are going to get to move, and it is now the other player's turn. Gives the game a very strong feel of constant motion, constant motion, constant motion. You have to be constantly planning your future actions. You want to make sure that your players aren't in the worst position for you after you score. For example, placing this guy right here, if this was this player's turn, probably a pretty bad place for him because he's a guard and this ball is going to bounce right off of him, right off the gate. So that's why you got to use a lot of future planning. Now the way you score in Dreadball is you have to get one of your miniatures onto one of these colored hexes matching the color that you're trying to go against. Home team's trying to score on the red, visitor team's trying to score on the white. If you're not on one of the colored sections, you can't actually score, even if you happen to be right here next to the score. Since this is not one of the red sections, you can't score here. That's why I like to describe this as basketball. This hoop, I'm going to call it a hoop, doesn't pop up out of the ground unless you are in one of these colored sections. You're also going to notice that these colored sections have a darker color. If you're in this one of these spots, you actually score an extra point for making the score. So if you're here, you're going to score 2 points. If you're here, you're going to score 1 point in one of these areas. Also, these areas are worth 1 point each. This area back here is actually worth 3, so if you get further back in your opponent's goal, you're actually going to score 3 points. Or if you're right here and you manage to score, it's going to be 4 points. The reason why these kind of targets are actually harder to make. Normally, if you're right here or in one of these areas and you're a striker, you actually get to roll 3 dice to attempt to make a goal. But if you're all the way back here, it's -1 die, so it makes it a little more challenging to score. Now that we're through with a really long introduction and explanation of the rules, sorry about that, but miniature games are a little bit more in-depth. They take a little longer to explain. I'm going to take a moment to show you an example turn that will take place. This is going to be a game versus the humans versus the orcs. The humans have just scored 4 points by launching from this strike zone into here successfully, scoring 4 points, bringing the score to 4. Right now, it is the start of the 8th rush for the orc team. The rest of the human stuff has already been taken care of, including the movement of the ref. We're going to start the orcs team by moving the rush marker up, and then the ball is going to be launched onto the field for the orcs. Score 4 is going to make the ball 1, 2, 3, 4 is where the ball is going to land. It is now time for the orc player to start taking their turn. Right now I'm seeing the easiest thing that I can do is have the jack try to come pick up the ball and try to score, which would be a very, very quick run. Probably not the most efficient use of all his actions. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to try to cause a little bit of pain to the opponent, the humans, and I also have one of my jacks that's actually been knocked on the ground. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spend an action in an attempt to get my jacks off the ground. Standing up is a speed test. Jacks for the orcs have a speed of 3. They're actually pretty quick little guys. That's one of their advantages. So I'm going to roll 3 dice, and what I need to do is I need to roll a 3 or higher, and if I get 2 or more successes, not only am I going to stand up, I'm going to get a free action out of it. So far I got a 6, a 1, and a 1, which is 1 success, but since I have a 6, I get to re-roll it. If I get a 3 or higher, I'm actually going to get those 2 successes for the free action. And I did it. I rolled a 3. So now that I've gotten 2 successes with my stand-up action, I've actually doubled my successes. So not only is he going to stand up, he's going to get a free action. Now if I don't take that free action, I'm going to lose it. I'm actually going to opt, in this case, to lose that free action because I have a different plan. With my second action, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my guard 3 spaces, actually only 2 spaces, and I'm going to get him in position to attack this human Jax. I'm going to attack him with a slam, and since I'm attacking him from behind, this Jax cannot slam me back. And additionally, not only that, but since he's in the threat hex of an additional player, he's going to get -1 to his dodge, so I have a really good chance of injuring him. A guard gets to roll +1 dice on a slam, plus the fact that I moved is going to give me an additional die, so I get to roll 5 dice for my slam attempt. We're going to see that I rolled 4 successes, and Orc's guard has a 3 strength, so I only need to roll a 3 or higher for success, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 successes. Now it's time for the human Jax to try to dodge. Normally on a dodge you get 3 dice, but since this Jax is now in 2 threat hexes, and actually I watch how I'm wording that. In a normal contest, when it's a contested action, you only get a -1 to your dice for each additional threat zone you're in beyond the first one. So if it was just him and this guy wasn't here, he would get a full 3 dice. But this guy being here gives him a -1 to his dodge action. So he's going to roll his 2 dice. Now, a dodge action is based on speed, which means he needs to roll a 4 or higher. I rolled 2 3s, so he has failed his dodge action. And not only has he failed his dodge action, but I more than doubled the action. So not only is he going to be knocked down, he's going to have to make an armor check. And his armor check is going to be he's going to need 4 successful armor checks to avoid taking any injury. An armor check is going to be a roll of 3 dice. The human team, for the Jax, they have an armor of 4, so he needs to roll a 4 or higher. And he needs to get 4 successes to avoid getting injured. So I'm going to need to roll at least 1 6 and have your other dice succeed to avoid at least 1 injury. I rolled 1 4, which is going to be 1 success. So 4 hits minus 1 success is going to be 3 damage. He's going to end up actually in the number 3 slot in the injury bin in his own side. I have now used 2 actions, and I have 3 actions remaining. For my third action, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guard, and I'm going to do a little bit more damage with him, and I'm going to see if I can take out that human guard. 1, 2, 3. I should have spent an action in advance, but you get the idea. And again, I'm attacking this guard from behind, so he can't slam me back. Normally, if you're in a threat zone of another guard or Jax, they can actually try to slam you back, and if they successfully slam you back, you can actually end up being injured. So since I'm attacking from behind, that can't happen. Get to roll 3 dice for the action, +1 for being a guard, +1 for moving before my slam attempt. I got 2 successes, and one of them is a 6. I'm going to reroll one of these misses, and I'm going to get a 6. I'm going to reroll one of these misses. It's going to be a 1, so I have 3 successes. This human guard gets to roll 3 dice for an attempt at a dodge. Going to need a 4 or higher for their speed test for a human guard. I got 0 successes versus 3 successes, so again I've doubled, and now not only is he going to be knocked down, he has a chance of being injured. As a slam follow-up, I actually have the option of moving up, and I think in this case I am going to move up and follow up. He's now going to make an armor check. Normally that'd be 3 dice, but guards get +1 dice, so he gets to roll 4. And the armor of a human guard is 4, so I need to roll a 4 or higher. I need to get at least 3 successes to avoid injuries. I've got 1 success plus a 6. I'm going to re-roll for that 6, and I'm going to get a 2. He's got 2 successes. For 3 damage, he is knocked out for 1 round. I now have 2 actions left, and I'm saving them for hopefully what'll be a successful score. Gonna take one action, move up with my jacks. 1, 2. He's gonna attempt to pick up the ball. Picking up the ball is a skill test for the jacks. So again, you're gonna start with the 3 dice. If he was a striker, you'd actually get a bonus of 1 extra dice, but he's a jack, so he's only gonna roll 3 dice. The skill-based test, I need to roll a 4 or higher. If I get 2 or more successes, I'm going to double my target number, and I'm actually going to free action. And that free action, in this case, of picking up the ball, can be a run or a throw. I rolled the dice. I got 1 success. I rolled a 5. So I don't get a free action, but I've successfully picked up the ball, and I did not fumble the ball and end my rush. I have 1 action remaining. I'm going to take that now and move my jacks. I have 2 options at this point. One, I can try to move here and score from here for 2 points, which is going to be pretty challenging for an Orc's jacks. Or I can move one of these squares, or sorry, one of these hexagons, and score only 1 point. But at least I'll move the points back in my favor a little bit. And the opponent is pretty injured, so I don't think I have to worry about him making a comeback anytime soon. I'm going to move 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, I'm going to leave them right here just because I want to be ready for any retaliation that could possibly come up. Normally I'd be out of actions, that'll be the end of my turn, but I'm going to spend one of my cards. It's a special move card. It says any player can take any action. I'm going to play this card now. And before I continue, some of you may have noticed that I do have an event in play. I wanted to explain it after I completed this rush because I didn't want to confuse too many things, but I thought I better mention that right now. And I'm going to use that as an example to explain how the fans would work. And actually, I'm looking at it now, that's probably a pretty poor decision, so I am going to actually show that right now. Right now, there's an event card in play. When it says at any time a player is injured, there is going to be an immediate fan check. So since I've actually injured 2 of his teammates, I'd have to actually take 2 fan checks. So I'm going to take my first fan check that I didn't do earlier. Again, I was doing it trying to avoid confusion, but I may need that extra die right now. So I'm going to get 3 extra fans plus the 2 I already got is going to be a total of 3 or more. I'm going to slide that under, and I'm going to get a coaching die for it. And then I'm going to draw an additional card for my other fan check. And this one's going to give me 1 more fan right there. So 2 more fans, and I'll get an additional coaching die. And seeing that, I think I'm actually going to adjust my move, and I'm going to actually go for the 2 points. Now my jacks is going to try to shoot from here into the score from this space, so he's going to get 2 points if he successfully makes it. If he fails, his rush is over either way, and the ball is going to scatter. Now making a throw, whether it's throwing to another player or throwing towards one of the strike zones, the difficulty is based on how far you're throwing. If you're throwing 1 through 3 hexes, you get to roll 3 dice. If you're rolling if you're doing 4 to 6 hexes, it's 2 dice. If you're going for 7 to 9 hexes, you only get to roll 1 die. You cannot throw any further than 9 hexes. I got to throw 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes, so I'm going to start off only rolling 2 dice. And since I'm going for a strike zone, I'm actually going to take away 1 die, so I'm only going to get to roll 1 die. That's why I backed up on the fan thing. I'm going to use my coaching die. Now, since this is a skill-based test, I need a 4 or higher. And I got it. I got a 5. So I score. I'm going to get 2 points. The marker is going to move from the 4 to 2, again moving in my favor. My rush has effectively ended. I get to do my end of turn upkeep. And then the ball is going to be relaunched on the other players, or it's going to be relaunched by the human player now. Upkeep is going to allow me to move this guy 1 closer in the injury bin towards the reserve bin. And then I'm going to get to move the ref, and I'm going to actually get an event card, which is called Blood on the Pitch, which is going to change the way the game currently plays, and this current event that gives extra fans for any injuries is no longer going to be in effect. This card has a 7 on it, which means I move the ref up to 7 spaces. It's my choice. I think we move him towards here so we can kind of mess with the humans. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's the end of the orc player's turn. It's now going to be the beginning of the human player's rush. They're going to start off by advancing the rush marker, launching the ball, then they're going to get their 5 actions. Dreadball lists as a game for ages 7 and up, plays in about 30 to 60 minutes. And although it's supposed to depict an extremely violent sport with injuries, fatalities, players dying, and everything like that, with a very strong futuristic, they call it futuristic, but it does have a slight fantasy feel to it. I mean, the game's got orcs. I mean, they're spelled ORX, but they're basic fantasy orcs, or orcs in space, however you want to call it. But having said that, the game actually has a very family-friendly art style to it. There's nothing in the game that's overly graphically violent. The worst case scenario is if somebody decided to paint their miniatures in a semi-gory fashion, which, sometimes people do that, especially when you see their zombie games. But assuming that doesn't happen, there's nothing to the imagery to the game that would be offensive to a younger player. It's actually not that hard of a game to learn how to play. The hardest part about the game is learning your modifiers. And unfortunately, and I'm going to get into this a little further, the game does not come with any player aids at all. It's really unfortunate. But if you want to play this game, you're going to have to start either searching the internet for some very nice player aids, and there are some nice ones out there, or you're just going to have to make your own. That does add to the difficulty of learning how to play the game. It can be challenging to learn a miniatures game, even for an adult. If you add into the fact that you're not having player aids or anything that help remind you, you're going to be constantly referring to the rule book, which is going to be a challenge for the younger players. If you're an adult playing with a child, though, it's actually pretty easy to teach the game. Every child can simply understand that they're going to get 5 actions, which are helped reminded by the action counters. They know that once their actions are over, their turn is over, assuming they don't fail in one of their actions and fall down and cause their turn to end prematurely. The game is pretty easy to teach other players. If you're somebody who knows how to play it pretty well, you can pretty much sit down with another player and just help them go through it. It's really easy to remember. It's basically 3 dice. The hardest part is to remember is just that there's lots of modifiers. And again, if you find one of those player aids online, go to Board Game Geek. You're going to find quite a few very nice ones there. I actually used one to help me learn the game. It was a really simplified learning the game. It was a nice flow chart. It said that if you do this action, if you're this class, you get +1. If you're this class, you get -1. It was actually really helpful in helping me learn the game. This is just a long-winded way of saying that this game, it's pretty family friendly. If you have a child who's 8, 9, 10 years old, they can pretty easily play with a parent. Have a lot of fun. The game is great because it plays quickly. The game, for adults, 2 adults who know what they're doing and aren't messing around, don't suffer from analysis paralysis, they're going to get a game done in about 45 minutes or less. If you have a kid who's trying to come up with decisions, probably about an hour and 15 minutes tops, and maybe worst case an hour and a half. Kids of course aren't going to play as well as adults are, but even a younger child can have fun, enjoy the game, making this a good game for 2 players, for a parent and a child to very much enjoy as a family. I give it a thumbs up as a family game in that aspect. As a miniatures-based game, Dreadball is actually a great, really fun 2-player game. It has the advantage of the fact that as a miniatures game, it actually plays very quickly. A lot of the miniature games, especially if you start looking at Warhammer 40K or some of the other games that are out there, you'll see that they can actually take a long time to play. Some of them can almost be called the type of game that is going to be the only game you're going to play on game night, taking 3, sometimes 4 hours, and they still play as a 2-player game. That's one of the great things about Dreadball, and I'm trying to avoid comparing it to Blood Bowl right now until I do my comparison later, but that's one of the great advantages of it, is you can literally play the game in about 30 to 45 minutes and get a good game. And that's, again, not including league play or anything like that. Speaking of league play, that's going to be the big deciding factor on whether this game is going to have a lot of legs or not. These kind of games are really enjoyable as one-offs, but the greatest fun that is enjoyed by these games is playing them with friends, playing a league, which is basically you're playing numerous games over like a weekly schedule or something like that, and you're taking the results from each game and carrying them over and playing a complete season of the game, called like an NBA playoff or playing up to a Super Bowl or whatever you want to call it. And that's one of the best, most enjoyable things of playing these kind of games. If this game is going to survive as a league game, it's going to have to take a little bit of time. They're going to have to continue to work on it. They're going to have to bring out more of the teams, because right now there's only 4 teams, and while they're pretty decent, they all seem pretty well balanced against each other. The trick is going to see if the game is going to stay balanced when the additional 4 races come out. Plus, when you start throwing in all the other MVPs that you start buying, the trick is going to see if this game overall in the long run is going to stay balanced. There is an extreme lack of, call it, player aids that come with the game. There are no player aids for the game at all. There's not any turn summaries. There are not any summaries for the races. Every time until you have this game memorized, you are going to be constantly pulling out this rule book, looking up your modifiers, looking up your statistics, looking up what your abilities are, and especially, you know, when you start doing league play and you start getting the skills and everything, you're not going to have it memorized what all your skills are going to do, and your players are going to start getting the skills, and you're not going to have it memorized. And again, there are no player aids. There's no player aids showing what your stats are for your team. There's no player aids to summarize the game turn or anything like that. So you're going to be constantly referring to this book. To me, that's a major negative of the game. You shouldn't be forced to go online to hunt down resources to help make a game better for you. And I hate to say it, because I really enjoy Dreadball. It's a great, fun game. I really enjoy playing a miniature sports game, especially with a strong fantasy theme. But not having those player aids was a major detriment to me. And I'm kind of shocked that for $80 they couldn't just throw in some random player aids. The board also was pretty decent quality. Not the best board I've ever seen in a board game, but it was pretty decent. The miniatures are fantastic. They're very well detailed. They were a little bit of took a little work to put them together, but once they're all put together, they turn out really well. And they do paint up extremely well. And, you know, I'm going to be honest, they look really nice once they're painted up. Overall, I think Dreadball is a fantastic game. The longevity of the game, again, as I said, is just going to be based on how well it's going to be supported, how balanced the future teams are, and just continued support from Mantic Games. But right now, as it stands with the 4 races and the MVPs, everything is very well balanced. It's a fun game. It's very enjoyable, and I definitely would recommend it to anybody who enjoys a miniatures-based game. Blood Bowl is a game that is over 25 years old, originally designed by Games Workshop, and it's really hard to do a review of Dreadball without comparing it to Blood Bowl, because on the surface the games do appear to have a lot in common, but those similarities, I guarantee you, are basically surface and cosmetic only. The games play very differently. It is basically comparing basketball to football in the way the games play, in the way the games are set up, and in how quickly the games also play. I've been playing Blood Bowl for a very long time. I've spent a lot of time playing the game. I've been playing it probably for at least 20 of the 25 years that it's been out. I have spent a lot of money on the game. I have purchased a lot of stuff for it. I have a lot of teams, a lot of stuff for it, multiple editions of the game. I've even managed to cram Dreadball. I'm sorry, we just call it Dreadball. I've even managed to cram Dungeon Bowl in the Blood Bowl box. I've got multiple teams. To say I enjoy Blood Bowl would be an understatement. I've never done a video review or a review of Blood Bowl at all, but Blood Bowl is my all-time favorite game. The most enjoyable time I've ever played a board game was playing a League of Blood Bowl. Playing over weeks. What I did when I was younger is what we do is we would follow the football season. And the very last game would be on Super Bowl Sunday. After the Super Bowl was done being watched, we'd have our final Blood Bowl match to see who the Blood Bowl champions were. Heck of a lot of fun. I have a lot of great memories for it. So maybe it's partially nostalgia, but I think Blood Bowl is a fantastic game. Having said that, though, I really enjoy Dreadball. I think there is room in the marketplace for both of the games. But instead of just starting off by saying that, I'm going to take it down. I'm going to separate the games. I'm going to show you basically what you're getting, how they play a little bit differently, and hopefully that'll help you decide if Dreadball is the right game for you, Blood Bowl is the right game for you, or if you want to be like me, if you want to own both of the games. First thing I got to mention before I go any further, though, is I am a fan of the Blood Bowl Living Rulebook version 6. Unfortunately, right now, Blood Bowl is slightly splintered. The game, while you can purchase the 3rd edition of the game, which is this big old beefy box right here, and I think it's about $80. You can still get it from Games Workshop. It comes with a lot of miniatures. It actually comes with more miniatures than Dreadball and quite a bit more components. I'm not going to be able to break down what it is. I'm not doing a review of Blood Bowl anyways because I've got so much junk thrown between these two boxes and this little brown case. I couldn't tell you what came with what case anymore at this point, and I don't think you really want to hear that anyways. When comparing Blood Bowl and Dreadball, you have to realize that they're both emulating completely different styles of games. While at their heart, both of them are a fantasy or a sci-fi take on sports that have been around for a long time. Blood Bowl is basically football. Dreadball is basically basketball with a little bit of extra stuff. For example, 3 hoops versus 1. They're also going to play like their parent game. Blood Bowl plays where you're going to play, every player is going to try to score by trying to get a touchdown. Once a team has scored a touchdown, the game is going to come to a stop. Everything is going to reset. Players are going to replace all their current surviving players back on the board, and another rush is going to start, or there's another rush, I'll call it a rush, is going to start where the player is going to try to score a touchdown again. They're going to have a kickoff and everything like that. Whereas in Dreadball, as soon as a player scores, that ball is going to immediately get launched back into the board. And your prior positioning before you scored is very important because if you move all your players over here in an effort to score, you have completely left your side of the board open for the opponent to come take that ball if they're positioned correctly and easily score. And if you don't plan your future moves, your opponent is going to constantly decimate you. If they can, they're going to get over here, score the 3 points, and they're going to win the game. Unlike in Blood Bowl, where you can work as hard as you can, do what you need to do, get your players wherever you need them, just in an effort to score that final touchdown. And once you've done it, doesn't matter where your players are, everything is going to reset and it's going to start all over again. Blood Bowl also has more players on the field. It starts with 11 players on the field, where Dreadball has 6 players on the field. That is also going to be part of why the game of Blood Bowl can actually take longer. Your average Blood Bowl game can take about 2 hours, maybe about 2.5 hours if you're playing really methodically or you have really 2 very well-balanced teams and they go into overtime. In Blood Bowl, all your players are going to move, and if you have 11 players, that's 11 players that are potentially going to move. And your turn doesn't end until you've moved all your guys or you cause something to happen that's going to cause a turnover where the other player's going to get the ball, like a fumble or something like that. Whereas in Dreadball, you only get 6 moves, or I'm sorry, you only get 5 moves for your 6 guys, plus additional moves from cards and from possible free actions. Blood Bowl, each player can move once. In Dreadball, your players can move more than once. Blood Bowl is a game that has been out for a lot longer. We're looking at a game that's 25 years old. There are 24 different races available for teams. 21 if you use the 5+ rules, 24 if you use the 6+ rules. Right now, Dreadball only has 4 teams, 4 races. There are 4 more races that are coming out in Season 2. And plus, they have plans beyond that. I think so far they have 12 teams ready or being worked on. Don't quote me on that, but I do believe it's 12. So Blood Bowl is going to have more of a feel of longevity, more of a feel of more available for the players, more decisions, more stuff that you can do with it. That does come with a slight negative, though, because having 24 teams, some of the teams suck. Some of them are Pretty much, they're in the game for you to handicap yourself to play against players who aren't very good at the game. For instance, if you're a long-standing Blood Bowl player, you played a lot of games, you're going to pick a halfling team, and you're going to let your opponent pick one of the good teams, like an orc team, or even a skaven team, or one of the dark elf teams, because those are the really good teams. And you're going to do it so you're basically handicapping yourself, or you're going to do it just because you like having fun. Whereas in Dreadball, right now the teams are very well balanced against each other. The orcs are kind of your bruiser team. Your humans are your good all-around team. Your Midgard Delvers are basically their dwarves, and they're your basic slow-moving but hard-to-hurt type of team. And then you have your Ratmen, who are your basic fast-moving, high-scoring team, but they cannot take the punishment. If the orcs play the Ratmen, the orcs are going to want to damage them to the point where they can't score bad, because they're basically going to be running circles around the orcs. Blood Bowl does come with player aids, which is a very nice bonus for you. See here that they come with player aids. Describing the human team and the orc team. If you want more player aids for the additional races, yeah, you're going to be responsible for hunting those down or making them yourself. But at least it does come with the player aids, and again, that is one of the big negatives I have with the box of Dreadball. Especially at $80, considering there's only 21 miniatures in the box, I expected a little bit more out of the game, especially in the form of player aids. Just stuff to help you get used to playing the game. It's a knock against Blood Bowl. It's a knock against Dreadball, and it's one of the things that I think Blood Bowl did very, very well. Blood Bowl does play a little bit more randomly, though. There's a lot more stuff that can rely on the dice roll. For instance, especially with injuries are a lot more random. One random lucky hit from a halfling hitting a giant ogre can knock out that ogre and take him out of the game. Whereas in Dreadball, yeah, that's possible, but the chances of that happening are very slim. It's going to take a lot of rolls for, a big guy to get knocked out by a really small guy. And in some instances, it's not even possible for a small guy. Like a striker cannot take out a guard. It's impossible. The rules won't allow it. Whereas in Blood Bowl, not only is that possible, if the dice are in your favor, it can happen. And it can be very frustrating if you have your very expensive tree man who is taken out by a goblin. Been there, frustrating, but it's the random luck in the game. Also in Blood Bowl, it uses a marker for passes, and basically you're going to lay this out, and choose wherever you're going to throw the ball. If there's an opposing player in the way, and I don't have any of my other teams out, sorry, but you're just going to have to bear with me here. If there's another opponent in the way of your throw, they actually have a chance to intercept the ball. Whereas in Dreadball, if there's somebody blocking your line of sight, you cannot make the throw and you cannot make the pass. Again, that's kind of a difference between having this be like a football field where interceptions are exciting and they happen, whereas in Dreadball, which is more emulating basketball, pass interference, interceptions type stuff, they happen, but they're not quite as common, and in the games, it actually won't allow you to do it, because if your line of sight is blocked, you just can't make the pass. The bottom line between Blood Bowl and Dreadball, if you had to choose between the two games, which one you had to own if you can only own one, first thing I would look for is I'd look for which sport you prefer. Some people prefer basketball, some people prefer hockey, some people prefer soccer, some people prefer American football. These games are going to play basically like their sport. If you want a football style game, obviously you're going to want to play Blood Bowl. If you want a more fast playing game that feels more like the NBA, you're going to want to get Dreadball. Also, Blood Bowl is a longer playing game. As I said, it can take up to about 2 hours or longer, especially with players who are just really not quite able to make those quick snap decisions on their plays, or they want to really judge each move, each potential move, because this game can be kind of unforgiving sometimes because there's a lot of luck with the dice rolls. One bad roll can be bad news for your team in this game. Well, that can happen in Dreadball too, but it seems worse in Blood Bowl, where the luck of the roll can be much more dominant. If you want to choose a game and you really don't care which sport it is, you just want to look for a miniatures game that is sport based and you don't care if it's basketball or football, the next question I'd ask yourself is, do you want a game that's been out for a long, long time, is not supported anymore by the company that makes it, but there are multiple teams, lots of replay value, rules that have been rewritten and rebalanced over 25 years by players and fans for a long, long time. You're probably going to look for Blood Bowl. If you want a game that has a lot of great potential, is currently extremely well balanced for the 4 teams that are out, and also looks like it's got a lot of good potential in the future, you may want to look at Dreadball. Overall, I'm glad I own both games. I will continue to own both games, and as a Kickstarter supporter, I'm actually going to end up getting 6 teams for what I've already paid. So I'm already 6 teams into the game itself. Probably going to look into getting some of the remaining teams that I didn't kickstart because it's a fun game and I'm having a lot of fun with it. But Blood Bowl will always be one of my favorite games, and I'm always going to keep it in my collection. The bottom line is, do you want a game that plays slow and methodical with a lot of history and has been fully developed and fully fleshed out, and you know what you're going to get, and the game is probably not going to get any more updates unless Games Workshop gives it a 3rd edition feel like they did with Space Hulk? Or do you want a game that plays very fast, can play in actually 30 to 45 minutes when you have players who know what they're doing, plays where you have to be constantly planning your future moves and feels very constant and very, very energetic, and it's just a constant game, then you may want to look at Dreadball. This has been an off-the-shelf review of Dreadball. A very long review, I apologize for this, but it's a long subject matter, and I definitely want to take the time to talk about Blood Bowl and Dreadball. Thanks for watching.